Dr. Akiva Gamliel, Belk, Dean of Jewish Studies at Noach Torah Institute, LLC. Welcome to 8. 8 is time. And this week we're in our second parshat of Devarim. It's Devarim Va'etchanan, and that's Deuteronomy chapter 3, verse 23 through chapter 11, verse 7. Dear ones, our discussion is best served in the notes this time. It's really going to be necessary to follow the notes. Our discussion is centering around the word Ba'ayt. In Deuteronomy 3:23, we read Moses speaking to the Lord. He said, "And I pleaded with the Lord Ba'ayt at that time." And so we're having a discussion about time, and we're having a discussion about gematria. And so we're just kind of seeing how they work together and learning along the way as we go, God willing. Now, the word Ba'ayt is the gematria of 472. And the word Bahitem is the gematria of 472. Bahitem means they wept or they weep. And so we recognize that when we travel back in time, and in this particular lesson, it's necessary to travel back in time. We go back to 22 Sivan, when Miriam said the words that she did about Moshe Rabbeinu, and the Lord God came down in a cloud which stood over the front of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, and he called Aaron and Miriam out, and in front of all of Bnei Israel, all the people of Israel, and said that Moses was special, that Moses was the most trusted in his house, and that he speaks to Moses face to face, and the Lord did. And he says, why would you say anything against Moses? And so when the cloud departed, Miriam was left with leprosy, and she was put outside the camp for 7 days. So the entire camp, the Sanhedrin, the 70 elders, all Bnei Israel, people, everybody knew Miriam was put out of the camp. They knew why she was put out of the camp. So 7 days passes, and then it's 29 Sivan. And that's in year, of course, 2449 from creation. So Bnei Israel has been, they are delivered from Egypt now for 1 year and 74 days. So on the day that Miriam is returned to the camp, Moshe Rabbeinu sends forth 12 spies. Now, every tribe provided a spy. The tribe of Joseph provided 2 spies, one for Ephraim and one for Manasseh. But the tribe of Levi, they believed in the Lord, and when the Lord said, "This is good land," the tribe of Levi said, "That's all we need to know. If God said it's good land, that's good for us. We don't need to send a spy. We have faith in God. We believe what God said." So the tribe of Levi did not send a spy. 12 spies were sent forth, and they spied the land for 40 days, and they returned on the 9th of Av. Now we know the story when they returned, that they brought home an evil report. Now Caleb and Joshua brought home a truthful, honest, supportive report that was supportive of Moses and Aaron and of the Lord God of Israel and of the land of Canaan, of the land of Israel. However, there were 10 spies, and remember all the spies, they were leaders. They were well-respected leaders of each tribe. And so 10 of the spies had predetermined they were just going to give a bad report about the land. And so their report was so convincing that when they gave the report, people mistrusted Moses and Aaron. And when they mistrusted them, the Sanhedrin spoke out. They were angry with Moses and Aaron. They thought that they had misled them. And the 70 elders spoke out, and they thought they had been misled also. And so this brings us to what happened. God was angry. He said, "You've tested me these 10 times, and that's it." This generation, the men of war in this generation, the ages of 20 to 60, the men of war, those of you that didn't want to go to battle, and even those who would have gone to battle, but who rebelled, they are not going to be able to enter the land of heirs Canaan. Only your children will enter. So there was a great deal of weeping on the 9th of Av, and there was a lot of sadness and a lot of unhappiness, and a great deal of this was led by the judges, the high court judges, the supreme judges, the Sanhedrin. And so the people were weeping, and one tent would start weeping, and then another would weep, and another, and before, along the whole camp, the encampment of Bnei Yisrael was weeping. Now the ladies did not participate in this. They remained true to the Lord God. The tribe of Levi did not participate in this. They remained true to the Lord God. Moshe Rabbeinu, Aaron, Joshua, and Caleb, they remained true to the Lord God. But these individuals that sinned, God called them out, and He says, "You're going to die in the wilderness. And you're going to be in the wilderness one day per year." So 40 days, 40 years. That's how long they spied for 40 days. So in 40 years, you're going to die. It turns out that they died within 38 years. And every year, leading up to the 9th of Av, they were told by Moses, "Go out and dig your graves." So 600,000 men went out and dug graves in the first year after their failing on the 9th of Av. Moses said, "Now lie in your graves tonight." So they laid in their graves, and in the morning, about 15,000 had died, and they were buried. So there was great mourning, great crying, great bewailing. The next year came around, the same thing repeated itself. And this went on for 38 years. Finally, at the end of 38 years, we are on the 38th Tish B'Av, and there's like 15,000 men left. Now, can you imagine the wives, the children, as these men have turned 60? They were among the youngest of the rebellious group, and they've turned 60. And they're the only ones left, 15,000 of them. And Moses says, "Go out and dig your graves." And they go out, and they dig their graves. And they lay down that night, and they die. Think about the wives. Think about the children. The husbands that were going to leave this world, who had sinned. Who was looking forward to the 9th of Av? And we think that we have problems fasting for 26 hours, fasting from one sundown or one nightfall to the next nightfall. But these men, they had to dig their graves. In the 38th year would be the 37th or 8th time that they had dug these graves. And so, wow. Then we see in the word ha-avel, meaning to mourn, to lament, the gematria of 38. We also see in the word yibeku, means to be well, to mourn and to be well. And so in these two gematrias of 38, we recognize the 38 years. Every time we came to the 9th of Av, how sad, how lamenting, how mourning, how bewailing it would be. We recognize that when Moses used this term, Baw Ayt, that it was in response to a very specific time. We don't know for sure what that time was. However, in our lesson, in our discussion, we do share systematically when that time was. And that time was after the last 15,000 men died on the 9th of Av, at the end of 38 years, when the word of the Lord was completed. when the Lord said that you're all going to die, and when the last man died, the prophecy the Lord gave, the promise that the Lord gave, that they were all going to die in the wilderness, was completed. It was Baw Ayt. It was at that time. Dear ones, we recognize how in our lesson we'll learn that the Sanhedrin and the 70 elders were a driving force behind leading the people into believing that Moshe Rabbeinu had deceived them and that he had tricked them. And in the notes, you'll see Numbers 14:1 and Deuteronomy 1:46. And in each situation, you're going to see the letter Tav. And we recognize that this Tav in each of these words is not part of what would normally be the word. And so here the Tav replaces the letter Nun. It would be Nasa. But here it's Tisa. And so we have to ask ourselves, why is this Tav here? What is the purpose for it? We recognize that the letter Tav is part of the word Ayt, part of the word that means a sign. And so it's the last letter of Ayt. And so we recognize we need to mine, we need to do Bible research, we need to study when we see a Tav appearing in a word that it normally doesn't appear in. And so we recognize that in the word, in the root word, nasa, that if we look at the nukudos, we see the word neseh. And neseh means to deceive, to mislead. And so we recognize that the people were angry and they all cried and they were all upset because they thought Moses and Aaron had deceived them. So, dear ones, this brings us to a concluding thought of we do need to be careful to learn all 613 mitzvot of Torah, because sometimes our leaders make mistakes. They're human like we are, and sometimes they misjudge a situation. We can all do that. And so we need to know the 613 mitzvot of Torah so that we'll be careful to be able to know if our leaders are following HaTorah, if they're on Derek HaTorah, if they're on the path of HaTorah. And we need to be careful to learn these 613 mitzvot so that we can keep ourselves on the path of HaTorah. Thank you for joining with me.